It was a cold, stormy evening in the heart of Wyoming. The wind howled like a wild animal, rattling the windows of Clara Dawson's modest farmhouse. Clara had spent most of her life on this small patch of land, working tirelessly to keep it running. Her days were long, filled with chores from sunrise to sunset, and her nights were quiet, often spent by the fire with a cup of tea and a book. But tonight, the storm outside made everything feel different. There was an uneasiness in the air, as if something unusual was about to happen. Clara had just finished tidying up the kitchen when she heard it, a faint knock at the door. At first, she thought it might be the wind playing tricks on her ears, but then it came again, louder this time. Wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders, she approached the door cautiously. Living alone in such a remote area meant she couldn't afford to take chances. She peeked through the peephole and saw a figure slumped against the doorframe, barely able to stand. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. Slowly, she opened the door, and there he was, a man, his face pale and drawn, his clothes torn and caked with mud. Blood seeped through a makeshift bandage wrapped around his side. He looked up at her with pleading eyes, his voice weak but desperate. "Please, I need help," he managed to say before stumbling forward. Clara hesitated for a moment. Letting a stranger into her home, especially one in such a state, wasn't something she took lightly. But looking at him now, she couldn't turn him away. His condition told her he wasn't a threat. He was someone in dire need of help. Without wasting another second, she stepped aside and let him in. Once inside, she helped him sit down on a chair near the fireplace. The warmth of the flames seemed to revive him slightly, but he was still in bad shape. As she cleaned his wound, with the medical supplies she kept stocked, a habit born out of necessity living so far from town, she asked him who he was and what had happened. His name, he said, was Jack Tanner. He was a cowboy, or at least he used to be. That much was clear from his weathered hands and rugged appearance. He explained that he'd been ambushed by rustlers while tending to his cattle miles away. They'd attacked him without warning, leaving him for dead. Somehow he'd managed to crawl away and find shelter in the woods, but he knew he wouldn't last much longer without help. When he saw the light from Clara's house in the distance, it was his only hope. As Clara listened to his story, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. Life hadn't been easy for her either, but hearing about the dangers Jack faced every day made her realize how fortunate she was to live in relative peace. Still, she couldn't ignore the nagging thought in the back of her mind. Who exactly was this man? Was he telling the truth, or was there more to his story? Despite her doubts, Clara decided to trust her instincts. For now, he was just a wounded man in need of care, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her from doing the right thing. After cleaning his wound and dressing it properly, she offered him some warm broth and bread. He ate slowly, savoring each bite like it was his first meal in days. "I can't thank you enough," Jack said between mouthfuls. "You saved my life." Clara shrugged modestly. "Anyone would have done the same," she replied, though deep down she wasn't so sure. Not everyone would open their door to a stranger, especially not in these parts where people tended to be wary of outsiders. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up, and Clara knew Jack wasn't in any condition to leave. She suggested he rest in the barn for the night. It wasn't luxurious, but it was dry and safe. Jack nodded gratefully, too exhausted to argue. Before heading out, he paused and looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "You're kinder than most folks I've met," he said softly. "I won't forget this." Clara smiled faintly. "Just get some rest," she said. "We'll figure things out in the morning." As she watched him walk toward the barn, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter might change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Little did she know the man she had taken in was no ordinary cowboy. Jack Tanner owned one of the largest ranches in the region, a sprawling estate of over 2,000 acres, but he carried none of the arrogance or pride that usually came with such wealth. In fact, he seemed almost ashamed of it, as if the land represented something painful rather than prosperous. That night, as Clara lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside, her thoughts drifted to Jack. There was something about him that intrigued her. Maybe it was the way he spoke, not like a man used to giving orders, but like someone searching for meaning. Or maybe it was the vulnerability she saw in his eyes, a stark contrast to the tough exterior he tried to project. Whatever it was, she felt drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. The storm raged on, but inside the little farmhouse there was a sense of calm. Clara didn't know it yet, but her decision to help Jack that night would set off a chain of events that would alter both their lives forever. For now, though, all she could do was wait and see what the morning would bring. Over the next few days, Jack began to recover under Clara's care. The storm that had brought him to her doorstep eventually passed, leaving behind clear skies and crisp air. Each morning, Clara would check on him in the barn, bringing fresh bandages, food, and sometimes a cup of strong coffee. At first, their conversations were brief and practical, Jack thanking her for her help, Clara asking if he needed anything else. But as the days went by, they started talking more, sharing pieces of their lives with each other. Jack was fascinated by Clara's simple yet fulfilling existence. She worked hard from dawn until dusk, tending to her crops, feeding her chickens, and repairing fences when needed. Her farm wasn't large or impressive by any means, but it was hers, and she took pride in every inch of it. To Jack, who had spent years managing vast stretches of land filled with cattle and workers, Clara's way of life seemed almost poetic. It reminded him of a time before everything became complicated, a time when he still believed in the goodness of people. For Clara, learning about Jack's world was equally intriguing. He told her stories about his ranch, describing the endless fields, the herds of cattle dotting the horizon, and the breathtaking sunsets that painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. But there was sadness in his voice when he spoke about it, a heaviness that hinted at deeper struggles. When Clara pressed him gently, he opened up about the challenges he faced, not just the physical dangers of being a cowboy, but the emotional toll of betrayal and greed. "I used to think owning all that land made me powerful," Jack admitted, one evening as they sat together outside the barn, watching the stars twinkle above them. "But the truth is, it only made me a target. My own family turned against me over money. They didn't care about the land or the legacy. It was always about how much they could take." Clara listened intently, her heart aching for him. She couldn't imagine what it must feel like to be surrounded by so much wealth yet have no one to trust. In her own life, she'd learned to value relationships over material things. Her neighbors weren't rich, but they were kind, always ready to lend a hand when she needed it. That sense of community was something she cherished deeply. "You're lucky," Jack said suddenly, breaking the silence. "You don't need thousands of acres to be happy. You've got everything you need right here." Clara chuckled softly. "It's not always easy," she replied. "There are times when I wish I had more land, better equipment, or even just a little extra help. But I guess I've learned to make do with what I have." Her words struck a chord with Jack. For years, he had chased success, believing that accumulating more land and cattle would bring him happiness. But sitting here now, listening to Clara talk about contentment and gratitude, he realized how hollow those pursuits had been. What good was owning 2,000 acres if it left you feeling empty inside? As the days turned into a week, their bond grew stronger. They discovered shared interests. Both loved animals, enjoyed cooking hearty meals, and appreciated the quiet beauty of nature. One afternoon, Clara invited Jack to join her in planting new rows of vegetables in her garden. Though he wasn't used to such manual labor, he found himself enjoying the simplicity of it. There was something therapeutic about digging your hands into the soil, nurturing life from the ground up. "Do you ever dream of expanding your farm?" Jack asked as they worked side by side. Clara paused, wiping sweat from her brow. "Of course," she admitted. "I'd love to grow more crops, maybe raise a few cows of my own someday. But dreams like that take time. And money," she added with a wry smile. "For now, I'm happy just keeping this place going." Jack nodded thoughtfully. He admired her optimism, her ability to find joy in the present moment while still holding on to hope for the future. It was a quality he wished he possessed himself. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Jack felt compelled to share something personal. "Clara," he began hesitantly, "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you. You've given me more than just shelter. You've shown me what truly matters." Clara looked at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "What do you mean?" He sighed, choosing his words carefully. "In my world, people are quick to judge, quick to take advantage. Trust is rare, and kindness is rarer still. But you welcomed me without hesitation even though I was a complete stranger. You treated me with respect even when I had nothing to offer in return. That's not something I'll ever forget." Clara blushed slightly, unsure how to respond. She hadn't done anything extraordinary, just followed her instincts and acted with compassion. Still, hearing Jack express his gratitude so sincerely touched her deeply. "Thank you for saying that," she said finally. "But you're giving me too much credit. Anyone would have done the same." Jack shook his head firmly. "No, they wouldn't. And that's what makes you special." The conversation lingered between them as the last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon. Neither of them spoke for a while, content to sit in companionable silence. But in that moment, something shifted between them. Their connection, which had started as mutual respect, began to deepen into something more profound. That night, as Clara lay in bed, she replayed their conversation in her mind. Jack's words had stirred something within her, a mix of admiration, curiosity, and perhaps even a flicker of affection. She knew she shouldn't let herself get carried away. After all, he was a guest recovering from injuries, and she had no idea what his plans were once he healed. Yet she couldn't deny the warmth she felt whenever he smiled at her, or the comfort she found in his presence. For Jack, the feelings were equally confusing. He had come to Clara's farm broken and defeated, carrying the weight of his past mistakes. But in her company he felt lighter, as if some of that burden had been lifted. She reminded him of everything good in life: kindness, honesty, resilience. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to envision a different future, a future where he didn't have to carry the weight of his land alone. As the days continued to pass, both Clara and Jack found themselves looking forward to their evenings together. Whether it was sharing a meal, working side by side, or simply sitting quietly under the stars, these moments became the highlight of their days. They were two very different people brought together by chance, but their growing friendship proved that sometimes fate has a way of working in mysterious ways. Little did they know, the foundation they were building, rooted in trust, understanding, and shared experiences, would soon lead to decisions neither of them could have anticipated. For now, however, they were content to enjoy each other's company, cherishing the simplicity and beauty of the present moment. It was early morning when Clara stepped out of her house, the golden sunlight streaming through the trees and casting long shadows across the yard. She carried a tray with 2 mugs of steaming coffee, intending to share it with Jack, who had taken to spending his mornings sitting on the wooden bench outside the barn. The air smelled fresh, tinged with the scent of dew-soaked grass and wildflowers. It was one of those perfect days that made Clara feel grateful for the little things in life. When she reached the barn, she found Jack already there, staring off into the distance. He looked lost in thought, his expression unreadable. Placing the tray down beside him, she handed him a mug and sat quietly, giving him space to speak if he wanted to. For a while, neither of them said anything. They simply sipped their coffee, the silence between them comfortable yet charged with an unspoken tension. Finally, Jack broke the quiet. "Clara," he began, his voice low but steady, "there's something I need to tell you." She turned to look at him, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" she asked gently. Jack hesitated, as though choosing his words carefully. Then, reaching into the pocket of his jacket, he pulled out an envelope. It was plain, nothing remarkable about it, but the way he held it told Clara it contained something important. He placed it on the bench between them, his hand resting on top of it like a shield. This belongs to you now, he said, pushing the envelope toward her. Clara stared at it, confused. What do you mean? What is this? Jack took a deep breath before answering. It's the deed to part of my land, 2,000 acres to be exact. I've signed it over to you. Clara froze, her mind struggling to process what he had just said. Wait, what? She stammered, shaking her head in disbelief. You can't be serious. I am, Jack replied firmly. I've thought about this a lot, Clara. This land, it doesn't mean anything to me anymore. All it represents is pain, betrayal, and greed. I don't want it anymore. But you're different. You remind me of everything good in life. You deserve it. Clara's heart raced as she tried to wrap her head around his words. Jack, I can't accept this, she said quickly, pushing the envelope back toward him. This is your land, your family's legacy. I'm nobody. I'm just a farmer trying to get by. I can't take something like this from you. Jack leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. That's exactly why I'm giving it to you, he insisted. Because you're not greedy or selfish. You work hard, you care about others, and you don't expect anything in return. People like you are rare, Clara, and I believe you'll use this land wisely. But Clara trailed off, her thoughts spinning. What about your family? Won't they fight you over this? Won't they try to stop you? Jack's jaw tightened at the mention of his family. Let them try, he said bitterly. They've already taken everything else from me. This decision isn't about them, it's about me doing what I think is right. And I know, deep down, that giving this land to you is the best thing I can do. Clara felt torn. On one hand, she understood why Jack wanted to let go of the land. It was clear it brought him nothing but misery. On the other hand, accepting such a massive gift felt wrong, almost overwhelming. She wasn't used to receiving favors, let alone something as monumental as 2,000 acres of prime ranch land. Jack, I appreciate what you're trying to do, she said slowly, choosing her words carefully. But this is too much. I don't even know where to begin with something like this. I'm just a simple person with a small farm. How could I possibly manage all that? You wouldn't have to do it alone, Jack assured her. I'd help you every step of the way. Besides, I've seen how hard you work. If anyone can turn this land into something meaningful, it's you. His confidence in her was touching, but Clara still couldn't shake the feeling that this was too big of a responsibility. I don't know, she murmured, staring at the envelope as if it might bite her. This feels impossible. Jack reached out and placed a reassuring hand on hers. Clara, listen to me. You've already given me so much. Shelter, kindness, hope. Let me give this to you, please. It's the least I can do. The sincerity in his voice made Clara's chest tighten. She knew how much this meant to him, how much he needed to move on from his painful past. Refusing outright would only hurt him, and she couldn't bear the thought of that. Still, the weight of his offer hung heavily over her. After a long pause, she sighed deeply. All right, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll think about it, but I'm not promising anything. A flicker of relief crossed Jack's face. That's all I ask, he said softly. Take your time. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. For the rest of the day, Clara couldn't stop thinking about the envelope sitting on her kitchen table. Every time she glanced at it, her stomach twisted with uncertainty. Was she being foolish to even consider accepting it? Or was Jack right, that sometimes taking a leap of faith was necessary to create change? As evening fell, Clara decided to take a walk to clear her head. She wandered through her fields, letting the cool breeze soothe her racing thoughts. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, and the world seemed peaceful. Yet inside, Clara's mind was anything but calm. She thought about Jack, the man who had shown up on her doorstep wounded and broken, only to reveal himself as someone kind, thoughtful, and deeply troubled. Over the past week, she had come to admire him more than she cared to admit. His generosity, his vulnerability, his determination to start anew. All of it resonated with her on a level she hadn't expected. And then, there was the land itself. 2,000 acres. The sheer size of it was staggering. Clara had always dreamed of expanding her farm, of having enough space to grow more crops, raise animals, and maybe even build a proper home someday. But this was beyond her wildest dreams. Could she really handle something so vast? Would she be able to live up to Jack's expectations? As she stood at the edge of her property, gazing out at the horizon, Clara realized something important. This wasn't just about the land. It was about trust. Jack was placing his faith in her, believing that she could transform his burden into something beautiful. Turning him down would feel like rejecting not just the gift, but also the bond they had formed. With newfound resolve, Clara returned to the house. Sitting at the kitchen table, she opened the envelope and read through the documents inside. Though the legal jargon was intimidating, the message was clear. Jack was handing over a piece of his life to her, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what that might look like. By the time Jack joined her later that night, Clara had made up her mind. When he walked in, she looked up at him with a determined glint in her eye. "I'll accept it," she said firmly, "but only because I believe we can make something good out of it. Together." Jack's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Are you sure?" he asked, wanting to confirm she was certain. "Yes," Clara replied with a nod. "This isn't just your gift to me, it's our chance to start fresh, to build something meaningful." For the first time in years, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him. In Clara's acceptance, he saw hope, not just for the land, but for himself. Together, they had taken the first step toward a future neither of them could have predicted, bound by trust, friendship, and the promise of renewal. Word traveled fast in small towns, especially when something as shocking as Jack Tanner signing over 2,000 acres of prime ranch land to a woman like Clara Dawson happened. It wasn't long before whispers began spreading through the community. At first, it was harmless curiosity, people wondering how Clara, who had lived quietly and modestly for years, suddenly found herself in possession of such a vast amount of land. But soon those whispers turned into accusations, fueled by jealousy, suspicion, and old grudges. Clara noticed the change almost immediately. When she went to town to pick up supplies, the friendly smiles she was used to receiving were replaced with cold stares. Shopkeepers who once greeted her warmly now avoided eye contact or muttered under their breath as she passed. Even neighbors she had known for years seemed distant, their conversations stilted and awkward. It was clear that something had shifted, and Clara couldn't ignore the growing tension around her. One afternoon, while loading bags of feed into her truck at the local co-op, Clara overheard two women talking nearby. They weren't trying to hide their conversation either. "Can you believe it?" one of them said loudly. "She lets some stranger stay on her property, and next thing you know, he hands over half his ranch. Sounds fishy if you ask me." The other woman nodded knowingly. "Mark my words, there's more to this story than meets the eye. Folks like her don't get lucky breaks like that without strings attached." Clara felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. She wanted to confront them, to defend herself, but she knew it wouldn't do any good. Instead, she bit her tongue, finished loading her truck, and drove home as quickly as possible. Once there, she slammed the door shut behind her, letting out a frustrated sigh. She hadn't asked for any of this. All she had done was help someone in need, just like anyone else would have done. Why were people twisting her actions into something sinister? Jack saw the toll the rumors were taking on Clara. He noticed the way her shoulders sagged when she came back from town, the way she avoided mentioning her trips outside the farm. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, he finally brought it up. "You're not yourself lately," he said gently. "What's going on?" Clara hesitated, unsure whether she should burden him with her troubles. But then she realized he deserved to know. After all, this mess started because of him. "People are talking," she admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. "They think I manipulated you into giving me the land. Some even say I must have planned it from the beginning." Jack's expression darkened. "That's ridiculous," he snapped. "You didn't manipulate anyone. You saved my life, Clara. This was my decision and no one else's." "I know that," Clara replied softly. "But try telling that to the whole town. They see me as some kind of opportunist, a nobody who got lucky because a rich cowboy showed up on my doorstep." Jack clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "I won't let them treat you like this," he said firmly. "If anyone has a problem with what I did, they can come talk to me directly." Clara appreciated his loyalty, but she also knew it wasn't that simple. Jack's family, particularly his estranged cousins who had been eyeing his land for years, were already stirring the pot. They had hired lawyers to challenge the legality of the transfer, claiming Jack wasn't in his right mind when he signed the documents. Others in town jumped on their bandwagon, eager to believe the worst about Clara. Things escalated further when a group of men showed up at Clara's farm one morning, demanding answers. Jack stepped forward to address them, his towering frame and commanding presence enough to make them pause. "This is private property," he said sternly. "If you've got something to say it to my face." One of the men, a wiry fellow with a sneer, spoke up. "We just want to know what really happened here, Tanner. Did she trick you, threaten you, or are you just feeling guilty for bleeding all over her floor?" The insult stung, but Jack didn't rise to the bait. "Clara didn't ask for anything," he replied evenly. "She helped me when no one else would. If you've got a problem with that, take it up with me, not her." The confrontation ended with the men leaving, muttering threats under their breath, but the damage was done. Clara felt the weight of the entire situation pressing down on her. Not only was she being judged unfairly, but she was also dragging Jack deeper into conflict. Was accepting his gift worth all this trouble? Would things ever go back to normal? Despite the hostility, Clara refused to back down. With Jack's support, she decided to fight back, not with anger or aggression, but by proving the critics wrong. Together, they began transforming parts of the newly acquired land into something productive. They planted crops, repaired old fences, and built stables for livestock. Word spread about their efforts, and slowly, some of the townsfolk started to soften their stance. A few even offered to help, moved by Clara's determination and Jack's willingness to stand by her side. Still, the resistance lingered. Jack's relatives filed a lawsuit, claiming the land transfer was invalid due to coercion. The legal battle was exhausting, draining both Clara and Jack emotionally and financially. There were days when Clara wondered if it was all worth it, if the stress and judgment outweighed the benefits of having the land. But every time doubt crept in, she reminded herself of why she had accepted the gift in the first place. Not for greed or ambition, but because it represented an opportunity to create something meaningful. During one particularly difficult week, after attending yet another court hearing, Clara broke down in tears. Jack found her sitting alone in the barn, her face buried in her hands. Without saying a word, he sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. For a while they stayed like that, neither speaking, drawing strength from each other's presence. "I'm sorry," Jack said eventually. "I never meant to cause you so much pain." Clara wiped her eyes and looked at him. "It's not your fault," she said softly. "I chose to accept your gift, knowing it might come with challenges, and I'd do it again because it gave us a chance to build something together." Her words filled Jack with a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that this wasn't just about defending the land, it was about standing up for the values they both believed in: honesty, hard work, and compassion. No matter how hard things got, they couldn't let fear or hatred win. As weeks turned into months, the tide began to turn in their favor. The judge overseeing the case ruled in their favor, dismissing the claims of coercion and validating the legitimacy of the land transfer. It was a victory, but it came at a cost. Clara and Jack had sacrificed their peace of mind, their energy, and their trust in others to prove their innocence. Yet through it all, their bond had grown stronger. The experience taught them both valuable lessons about resilience and the power of standing by your convictions. Clara learned that sometimes doing the right thing meant facing adversity head-on. Jack discovered that true redemption came not from running away from his past, but from using it to create something better. By the time the dust settled, the town's opinion of Clara had shifted. Many still whispered behind her back, but others openly admired her courage and determination. More importantly, Clara and Jack had proven to themselves that they could overcome anything as long as they stood together. The land, once a source of division and strife, had become a symbol of unity and hope, a testament to the strength of their partnership and the promise of a brighter future. With the legal battle finally behind them, Clara and Jack turned their full attention to the land. The fields that had once been neglected were now brimming with potential, waiting to be transformed into something meaningful. Together, they poured their energy into rebuilding, not just fences and barns, but a sense of purpose and community. It wasn't easy. The work was backbreaking, and there were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them. But every sunrise brought new opportunities, and every sunset marked another step forward. Clara took charge of organizing the farm's expansion, drawing on years of experience managing her own property. She mapped out plans for crop rotation, irrigation systems, and livestock grazing areas. Her practical approach kept things running smoothly, while her optimism inspired those around her. Jack, meanwhile, used his knowledge of ranching to oversee larger projects like repairing old structures and building new ones. Though he was still learning how to adapt to Clara's simpler way of life, he threw himself into the work with enthusiasm, finding joy in tasks he hadn't done in years. One of their first major projects was converting part of the land into a community hub, a place where locals could gather, share resources, and support one another. They built a small market where farmers could sell fresh produce, set up workshops to teach skills like carpentry and animal husbandry, and even created a space for children to play safely. The idea was simple: to create something that benefited everyone, not just themselves. At first, many townsfolk remained skeptical. Some dismissed the project as naive, believing it would fail like so many others before it. Others saw it as an attempt by Clara and Jack to buy goodwill after all the controversy. But as the weeks went by, curiosity got the better of them. Slowly, people began showing up, first a trickle, then a steady stream. Farmers brought surplus crops to trade, artisans offered handmade goods, and families came to enjoy the open space. What started as a modest effort quickly grew into a vibrant center of activity. Clara noticed the change almost immediately. The hostility that had once defined her interactions with the town began to fade, replaced by cautious smiles and tentative conversations. One day, as she arranged vegetables at the market stall, a woman approached her hesitantly. "I'm sorry about everything," the woman said softly. "We judged you too harshly. You've done so much for this town already." Clara smiled warmly. "Thank you," she replied. "All I ever wanted was to help. That's what this place is about. Helping each other." Word of the community hub spread beyond the immediate area, attracting visitors from neighboring towns. Local businesses saw an increase in customers, and some even hired additional workers to keep up with demand. For the first time in years, the region felt alive with possibility. People who had once viewed Clara and Jack with suspicion now looked to them as leaders, proof that kindness and hard work could overcome even the deepest divides. Amid all the progress, Clara and Jack found themselves growing closer than ever. Their partnership extended far beyond the land. It became a deep, unspoken bond built on mutual respect and shared goals. They spent long hours working side by side, laughing over mistakes, and celebrating small victories. In quieter moments, they talked about their dreams for the future. Clara imagined expanding the farm further, maybe even starting a school for local kids. Jack dreamed of hosting rodeos and festivals, bringing people together in ways he'd never thought possible. Yet, despite their growing connection, neither acted on the feelings simmering beneath the surface. Both were hesitant to complicate their relationship, fearing it might disrupt the delicate balance they had worked so hard to achieve. Instead, they focused on nurturing the land and the community, finding fulfillment in the tangible results of their efforts. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Jack turned to Clara with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think About what might have happened if I hadn't shown up at your door that night, he asked. Clara chuckled softly. Probably not, she admitted. Life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it? If you hadn't come, I wouldn't have this land or these challenges or this amazing chance to do something good. Jack nodded, gazing out at the fields stretching endlessly before them. It feels strange, doesn't it? To think that something so painful could lead to something so beautiful. It does, Clara agreed. But maybe that's the point. Sometimes we have to go through the hard parts to get to the good ones. Her words stayed with Jack long after they retired for the night. He realized how much he had changed since meeting Clara. The man who had arrived at her doorstep broken and defeated was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more hopeful. And Clara, she had taught him the value of resilience, of finding light in the darkest moments. Together, they had created something extraordinary, not just a thriving farm or a bustling community, but a legacy rooted in trust, compassion, and renewal. As the months passed, the transformation of the land mirrored the transformation within Clara and Jack. Fields once barren now sprouted rows of golden wheat and lush vegetables. Barns stood sturdy and proud, housing cattle and horses that grazed peacefully in the meadows. The community hub buzzed with activity, a testament to what could be achieved when people worked together toward a common goal. The townsfolk who had once doubted Clara and Jack now rallied around them, offering help wherever needed. Children ran through the fields laughing and playing, while adults exchanged stories and shared meals. Even Jack's estranged relatives, who had fought so bitterly against the land transfer, eventually softened their stance. Seeing the positive impact Clara and Jack had made, they grudgingly admitted defeat, and perhaps in their own way found a measure of peace. Through it all, Clara and Jack remained steadfast, leaning on each other during the toughest times and celebrating the victories no matter how small. Their journey had been anything but easy, but it had brought them closer to understanding what truly mattered, not wealth or power, but the connections they forged and the lives they touched. And though neither dared to say it aloud, both knew their partnership was becoming something deeper. The seeds of love had taken root, nurtured by shared struggles and triumphs. For now they chose to let it grow quietly, content to focus on the present and the incredible future they were building together. Underneath the vast Wyoming sky, surrounded by the fruits of their labor, Clara and Jack knew they had found something rare and precious. It wasn't just land or success, it was a second chance at life, love, and happiness. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in hues of gold and crimson, they allowed themselves to dream of all the possibilities. Still ahead, years had passed since the day Jack Tanner stumbled onto Clara Dawson's farm, wounded and weary, seeking refuge from the storm. What began as an act of kindness, a simple decision to help a stranger in need, had blossomed into something neither of them could have predicted. The land that once symbolized pain and betrayal for Jack now stood as a beacon of hope and renewal, not just for him and Clara, but for the entire community. It was a testament to the power of trust, hard work, and compassion. The annual Harvest Festival had become a cherished tradition in the town, drawing visitors from miles around. Held on the sprawling fields of what was now known as Dawson Tanner Farms, the festival celebrated the bounty of the land and the unity of the people who worked it. There were stalls selling fresh produce, handmade crafts, and delicious, homemade pies. Children laughed as they chased each other through hay bales while adults gathered around bonfires sharing stories and music late into the night. It was a far cry from the tension and hostility that had once divided the town. Clara stood near one of the market stalls, watching the festivities with a contented smile. She wore a simple dress, her hands dusted with flour from baking bread, earlier that morning. Though she still rose before dawn to tend to the farm, life felt lighter now. The weight of judgment and suspicion that had once burdened her was gone, replaced by the warmth of acceptance and gratitude. People no longer saw her as an outsider or someone to be feared. They saw her as a leader, a friend, and a cornerstone of their community. Jack approached her, carrying 2 mugs of hot cider. He handed one to Clara and leaned against the stall. Beside her, his eyes scanning the lively scene. "Looks like we did all right," he said with a grin, raising his mug in a silent toast. Clara chuckled softly, clinking her mug against his. "We did more than all right," she replied. "This place, it's everything I dreamed it could be." Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And more than I ever thought possible," he added. "I used to think owning all this land made me important. But standing here now, surrounded by people who care about each other, I realize how wrong I was. This isn't about the acres. It's about what we've built together." Their conversation was interrupted by a group of children running up. To them, eager to show off the pumpkins they had decorated for the festival. Clara knelt down to admire their handiwork, laughing at the creative faces carved into the orange gourds. Jack watched her interact with the kids, marveling at how natural she seemed in moments like these. She had always been kind, but over the years, her confidence had grown. She wasn't just a farmer anymore. She was a mentor, a role model, and a source of inspiration for everyone around her. As the evening wore on, the crowd gathered around a makeshift stage where local musicians played lively tunes. Jack and Clara found themselves swaying to the music, their movements effortless and familiar. They hadn't danced much in their lives, but tonight, surrounded by friends and laughter, it felt right. For a moment, they forgot about the challenges they had faced, the lawsuits, the rumors, the doubts, and simply enjoyed being alive together. Later, as the festival wound down and the stars began to twinkle above, Jack and Clara walked hand in hand toward the edge of the property. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves and wood smoke. They stopped beneath a large oak tree, its branches stretching skyward like arms reaching for the heavens. "I've been thinking," Jack said, breaking the peaceful silence. "About us." Clara turned to look at him, her heart skipping a beat. Over the years, their bond had deepened, evolving from friendship to something richer and more profound. Yet, they had never put a name to it, choosing instead to focus on the land and the community they had built. Now, standing here under the starlit sky, it felt like the right time to acknowledge what lay between them. "Go on," Clara encouraged, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "When I came to your farm all those years ago, I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe redemption, maybe peace, but what I found was you. You saved me, Clara. Not just my life, but my soul. And I don't want to spend another day without telling you how much you mean to me." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes as she listened to his words. She had spent so many nights wondering if Jack felt the same way, afraid to voice her own feelings, for fear of ruining what they had. Hearing him speak so openly filled her with a sense of relief and joy she hadn't known she needed. "I feel the same way," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "You've given me so much. This land, this community, a future I never thought I'd have. But most of all, you've given me yourself, and that's worth more than anything." Jack smiled, pulling her close. "Then let's make it official," he said. "Let's build the rest of our lives together, side by side. No more waiting. No more holding back." Clara nodded, her tears spilling over as she wrapped her arms around him. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's." In the days that followed, news of their engagement spread quickly through the town. To the surprise of no one, the announcement was met with overwhelming support. Friends and neighbors rallied to plan a wedding celebration that would rival the Harvest Festival in size and spirit. Everyone wanted to honor the couple who had done so much for them, turning adversity into opportunity and division into unity. The wedding took place on the farm, beneath the same oak tree where Jack and Clara had shared their heartfelt conversation. The ceremony was simple yet beautiful, attended by everyone whose lives they had touched. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through every challenge and triumph, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the fields. It was a perfect moment, filled with hope and promise. In the years that followed, Clara and Jack continued to nurture their land and their community. They expanded the farm, introduced sustainable practices, and welcomed new families to join their efforts. Their partnership remained the foundation of everything they achieved, a reminder that even the hardest journeys can lead to the most rewarding destinations. When asked about their secret to success, Clara often smiled and said, "It's not about the acres or the achievements. It's about believing in people, even when they don't believe in themselves." And as she looked at Jack standing beside her with pride and love in his eyes, she knew those words were true. Together, they had transformed a patch of Wyoming wilderness into a thriving hub of hope and connection. But more importantly, they had transformed each other, proving that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as storms, and that the simplest acts of kindness can change the course of a lifetime.